Alright, I'm using my shape cut to cut a bunch of 3.5-inch strips and 2-inch strips. Just makes it go a lot faster. And so I've got my ruler marked with 3.5 marks so I don't have to look for the numbers, and it just goes really fast. And whatever's left over on the end I usually cut in 2-inch strips, or I cut whatever I can get off of it. Clean up that edge. That's 2 3.5-inch strips, and then I'll go to the number 9 and the number 11. So we'll just see what we have left, and I'll do another 3.5-inch strip, and I'm just going to do a 5.5 the mark to make a 2-inch strip. And this is my leftover. So I've got my 2-inch strips and my 3.5, which I didn't cut all the way through. Okay, cut a bunch of scrap batting to 3.5-inch square. I'm using my Go 3.5-inch square that came with one of my Go cubes. But you can use whatever you want to make them 3.5-inch squares. So I'm going to cut out a whole bunch of these. This is optional, but I do like to cut off the corners of my batting pieces. It really helps to make sharper points. It reduces the bulk in the corners once you turn the project right side out. So you don't have to measure or anything like that. Just trim off the corners of the batting if you would like to do that. Okay, take your 3.5-inch strips. These are going to be the backing, and I marked in red. So I'm going to need some of them 3.5 and some of them 2.5. So for each prayer square you need a 3.5 and a 2.5 for the pocket on the back. So I just do a bunch lined up here. I'm going to cut off that selvage end and line up the bottom on a line. So this first one's going to be a 3.5-inch cut. And then I've got another red mark here, another 3.5-inch cut. And then I'm going to do a 2.5 and another 2.5. I'm going to do that with all my 3.5-inch strips. The next thing I'm going to do is choose the fabrics for my 4-patch, and I'm going to sew the strips together. So I just have light colors here, so I've got the gray with the gray and the white with the off-white. So I'm going to go and sew these together to make a bunch of strip sets. So that's going to be 2 together and 2 together. Okay, take the strips that you have just sewn together and line up the seam side down. You can stack, let's just do a couple at a time. Go ahead and cut the thread chain here off. So their seams are pointing toward me. And I want to get rid of the selvage, so I'm going to cut them in 2-inch subcuts. So I'll just use my trusty tool here and get rid of the selvage on the 0 line, and then just go 2, I'm using the marks on the thing, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So now I have all of these little pieces here. So I'm going to press toward the dark, and in this case it's going to be the printed. So on all of these little pieces here, I'm going to press toward the dark. So I've got all these little two patch units done, and I'll just go ahead and finish cutting all of the rest of the strips in this way. Okay, we're going to take 2 of these units and flip them over like that and make a little 4-patch, so 1/4 inch seam, and then you're going to end up with a 4-patch block that measures 3.5 inches. So go and sew all of those together. I'm going to go and press the seams to one side. You can press the seam open if you want, but I prefer to do it this way. So I'm going to go and press all of my little blocks. The pocket lining is the same width as the outer pocket, and the pocket lining, we're just going to finish the top edge either by we're just running a serging or zigzag along the edge, or if you don't have a serger or a way to do a zigzag, you can turn this under twice, just a little narrow hem, and top stitch it down, because it's going to be exposed on the inside and it may start fraying when you start putting things in and out of the pocket. So the outer pocket needs to be also finished only on one side. You can serge it, then turn it under 1/2 inch and top stitch it down, which is what I'm going to do, or you can just turn it under just a little bit and just double fold it and then top stitch down, because this is going to be your outer pocket and you're going to be pulling cards and things in and out of there. So one edge needs to be finished on both of the lining and the pocket, and it's got to be one of these long edges, not the short edge. So I'm going to go and finish one edge of all of these pieces using my serger. The 2.5 inch lining piece just needs to be serged. You don't need to turn it under unless you use some other method of finishing the edge. I'm going to take the outer pocket and I'm just going to eyeball 1/2 inch and go and press that, and I'm going to top stitch along the top, just because this is going to be showing on the outside. So I'm going to make a nice little hem on the top of my pocket. Alrighty, I've hemmed all of my pockets and I just chained them through my sewing machine, so I'm just going to choose one for my outer fabric, my outer pocket. Just cut those apart right there. Alright, so we've got all of our pieces that have been prepared to construct our little prayer square. Alright, my pocket lining has been serged along one of the long edges. I've hemmed the top of my outer pocket. I've got my batting ready. I find it easier to go ahead and sew on whatever embellishment you want to do to the top of your little quilt block. I find it easier to do it at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this little charm in place. Alright, lay your batting down, your quilt block face up on top of the batting, lining up the raw edges, and then we're going to place our pretty side of our pocket face down on top of the quilt block with the raw edges lined up on one end. So I've paid attention to the direction that my little emblem is here, so that it's going to be facing the right direction. So this is the top of my pocket where a card's going to be put in there, so I want the top so I need to know what is the top of my block. So I'm going to take the pocket lining and turn it face down, and you're tempted to do it like this with the serged edge up, but you can do it this way. So as you can see, the pocket lining doesn't go all the way to the bottom, and that's fine. It's just going to make it easier to turn this thing, and we don't have to do any hand sewing at the end. So what I want to do now is go and sew on all 4 sides of this little sandwich that we made. Alright, I want to just trim up the corners a little bit. And then we're going to reach in here under this little lining piece and just turn up this side. Just one side at a time. It's easier to turn the corners when you do one side at a time. So I've got my R&K turning tool, which I really love, but you can use whatever you want to help turn those points. So it just makes it easier to get to this one once you turn the other one right side out. So now we're going to turn it over, and here's your pocket piece here. You just turn that out. Same thing. So if I did it correctly, my charm hangs in the right direction and my pocket is facing up. So all I need to do is neaten this up and go and press it. Alright, I just got a little scrap piece of yarn here and my little tag that I want to put in the pocket. So I'll just fold my string in half and then pass both tails through the little loop. So like, I think they call it a luggage tag knot or a lark's head knot. And then you just put it in the pocket. And the cords that we're using, I've put some little lines on there in case you want to write a note to someone, a friend, and maybe you know what they're going through, and you can write a little note of encouragement and just slip it in the pocket. I like to trim these up, and I also like to fray the edges. That's just my personal preference. Whatever you want to do to embellish it. There you go. Fast and easy.